Projectiles. Admittedly, they were like rubber
Let's
bullet
go,
type things that they were firing at people. But those images of protesters being shot in the back as they run away from police, I never would have thought the day that I would have turned on the television screen to see this happening in my country. It's like something that we would see in the Middle East or in another place that's been overcome with civil unrest. But this wasn't. In the main, these protests weren't violent. They were peaceful people. And the only reason they actually did turn violent was when police presented and tried to block protesters from doing something that would otherwise have been peaceful. We saw an image, and I'm not sure whether you have it on file, but it's the most shocking of all, of an elderly woman being body slammed to the ground and then pepper sprayed in the face. Now, I haven't heard of what happened to the two police officers that were involved in that, but I actually got up in the National Parliament some time ago saying that that these guys needed to be arrested and dealt with, these police officers, for doing that. And for that, I was condemned even by people in my own political party. So think about the mentality that there must be alive in this country and amongst the political elite when they're attacking you for saying that body slamming a peaceful old woman to the ground and then pepper spraying her in the face when she poses no threat is somehow the wrong thing to say.
We've also seen videos that are posted on the internet, on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, that show the hundreds of thousands protesting. That's pulled down. And then even footage of police being brutal, that gets pulled down. So they're trying to hide the crimes as well. I mean, this sounds like an Australian version of Tiananmen Square that's starting to unfold.
Yeah, I think that the good news is, though, we have that many citizen journalists out there at the moment, such as the Real Rukshan, whose images I think that you're using right now, who's just done a great job in getting the truth out to people. That a lot of people have switched off the corporate media. They're not interested in the sort of sanitised, whitewashed, fake news that they have put out, where they, there might be hundreds of thousands of people protesting and the media tell us it was a few hundred. We know what the reality is because we're seeing it through social media, or we're seeing it through the citizen journalist websites.
Absolutely, and so I'm glad you bring up positive things. I should have brought that up front. A lot of experts, including yourself, being a member of Parliament, but just myself watching it from a distance, it looks like the tide's turning and that there's really bigger and bigger exponential crowds, and all the arrogance and hubris of these different regional premiers and governors, and of course the Prime Minister is really starting to wear thin. You've written an article about this saying their plans are crumbling, we're winning. Break down how you say that's true, sir.
Well, because of the key thing that the Prime Minister said, that vaccination should not be mandatory. Now, that needs to be followed through with action, I believe, but it's a very, very good start. I mean, some people were a bit surprised to hear that because they thought that somehow the state government rules were being fully supported by the federal government, and so there was a bit of a political fight that was happening there for a while between state premiers, that's akin to your governors, and our Prime Minister over mandatory vaccinations. There's also a couple of other things that happened in the state of Victoria. They have proposed these permanent pandemic powers. So in other words, laws that would give one person in the government the authority to just lock down, to curfew people, to make any rule actually that would affect any particular person or any group of persons for any demographic. So if they decided that they wanted to do something to one particular ethnic group, they could do it. If they decided they wanted to do something to one to someone of a particular sexuality, they could do it. Or if they decided to do that to a particular local government area, they could. And the public, this is why you're seeing a lot of protests happening in Victoria. The public are dead against this. They do not want one person having that much power. It's egregious to a democracy and egregious to a free society.
Well, it's hard for me to watch. You talk about this. It's hard to watch what looks like about a 75-year-old woman being knocked on the ground, bleeding, begging for help, and the police just proud of themselves. I mean, this is true evil going on.
That's the video that I talked about that I spoke up against. You just saw before one officer body slam her to the ground, another one pepper spray her in the face. I think she had to be hospitalised as a result.
Somebody like that. I mean, they shove her over to make her head hit the concrete.
And so I said that those two officers needed to be dealt with. They should have been arrested, actually, quite frankly, because anyone else who did that to an old woman would have been arrested. But she posed no threat. It's the kind of overreach that we're seeing from police in Australia, sadly. There's been many incidents of this over recent times, particularly during the pandemic, particularly directed to anti-pandemic restriction or pro-freedom protesters. But Alex, the permanent pandemic laws that I spoke about that were going to come into place in Victoria were blocked in the Parliament.
And so that's more good news. Stay right there. They also have new censorship rules. They want one. Member of the Australian Parliament joins us live, George Christensen. Please stay with us. Let everybody tune in. And then later when this is archived, share it. So I've been on air 28 years. And for more than 20, we covered UN documents saying they would use a virus and the fear of it to bring in world corporate government and forced inoculations. That's in my film Endgame, made in 2007. And so it's on record in that film. Now, how did we know that? Well, because these are real battle plans. These are real operations. So when you see what's happening in Australia, understand that's a beta test for the rest of the world. And now you see them trying to roll out the exact same systems in Europe, Canada, and in blue cities controlled by the Democrats here in the United States. And so George Christensen is a outspoken, very popular member of the main ruling party in Parliament in Australia. And he, again, you saw it at the start of the interview last hour, he got somewhat censored and talked over when he was trying to lay out basic facts and information. So I want him to have the floor here for this segment to really give us his message to the tyrants, but also his message to the patriots, who could be liberal, could be conservative, could be gay, could be straight, could be black, could be white, could be old, could be young, could be Asian, doesn't matter. Red-blooded people that want to live in free countries. What is his message to the world? As millions of people are watching right now, and hopefully others will take the archive of this and share it to millions more. Because the tyrants cannot stand this information coming out. They cannot stand leaders like George Christensen standing up and saying, we need civil disobedience. I haven't seen any other members of Parliament have that much courage in a place where they are arresting and basically disappearing people to these quarantine camps. They're trying to roll out this total takeover to set the precedent. They're trying to pass these draconian martial law provisions and permanently put them in place. So how do we fight back, and what is your message to the tyrants?
Well, thanks, Alex. And firstly, to say that it was Martin Luther King that actually said that there was an ethical obligation or a moral obligation to have civil disobedience when it comes to bad laws. So this is one of the essence of democracy, and we're not talking about violence, we're talking about peaceful protest, we're talking about simply refusing to obey bad laws. And look, my message to the free world, my message to particularly that bastion of liberty and democracy that is the United States of America, is that you've got to oppose these sort of moves that we're seeing in Australia with every fibre in your body. We have seen lockdowns repeatedly on our citizens. We have seen small businesses and livelihoods destroyed because of those lockdowns. We've seen people curfewed in their own homes, can't go out at a certain time of night. We are now seeing people just being absolutely destroyed, deprofessionaled, lose their jobs, lose their livelihoods because they won't get a vaccine. So people are losing their jobs left, right, and centre because of this. There's going to be a form of medical apartheid in our country. It's happening all over the place where you can't be in polite social life in restaurants, cafes, museums, sports events, any sort of social setting if you are not double vaccinated. that is an affront to democracy. You've referred to it before with our Indigenous people or Aboriginal people, Alex. Yes, because there's a paternalistic mindset that Aboriginal people are somehow amorphous and we've got to protect Aboriginal people as some sort of set museum piece. They're riding roughshod over their individual rights because those people indeed are being forced, if they test positive for a PCR test, which is not completely accurate, we know that, but if they test positive, they're being rounded up and put into quarantine camps. There's people from all ethnic groups that are actually in these quarantine camps if they come back into the country, and it doesn't matter, actually, the bizarre thing, while this medical apartheid is going on, it doesn't matter whether they're double vaccinated or not when they come back into the country. They're all rounded up and put into these jumped up jail cells, which they call quarantine camps.
Well, we were just showing one of the new quarantine camps, and it looks like it's got electrical fence being put up at the top. I mean, it looks like something out of Auschwitz or something. Why would you get these big fences and guard posts and all the rest of it? But specifically here with George Christensen joining us in the middle of the night from Australia, member of Parliament. Tell us about the camps, because yes, everybody wants to know about those, and they're expanding them. They've got regional leaders saying this is going to be permanent. This is the new regime. You're going to take shots on a routine basis. I mean, don't talk to your neighbors. I mean, this is like an episode of Red Dawn or something.
It's very scary, very, very scary, and a lot of people questioning why are so many of these facilities being built. They told us at first it was only going to be for incoming arrivals if they have to be quarantined for 7 days. I mean, the question is, why the hell do they look like high security prisons? The second thing is we're seeing now that they're actually not being used for the purposes of incoming arrivals. What they're being used for is to, in the cases of the Northern Territory, where a lot of Aboriginal people are, they're being used to round up anyone who tests positive and to put them in there. Well, I've got to tell you, for me, it's going to be like, over my dead body. If I test positive and they want to come and get me, they're going to have to brutally rip me out of my own home. And there's probably a lot of freedom-loving people in Australia that will be of the same view that we're not going to go willingly into some quarantine camp and have all of our rights taken away from us. So this is just wrong, it's scary. Again, there's a lot of things that have happened over the course of this pandemic, Alex, which have just begged belief. I just cannot believe what's happened to my country. That's why, again, the message to the United States is you've just got to be vigilant. Joe Biden comes out and says he wants major corporations forcing vaccination on all of its workers. You've got to push back on it. You've got to take it on, and I understand that people have taken it on in the US, and that may have been defeated, but more and more of that stuff has got to happen, lest you will become like us, where we... I've been someone who's always been a bit hesitant about the idea of a Bill of Rights, because I figure that a Bill of Rights actually limits the amount of rights that you might have. Right now, I'm almost down on my knee begging that we actually have a Bill of Rights so that we can point to some document to say, you can't do this, government, this is wrong. We don't have that.
Well, it's definitely directed again to the multinational corporations who admit that this is the new normal. It's about cutting carbon. It's about tracking and controlling us with a vaccine passport. And then lock us down at first and let us out, give us our freedom back. But we never really get all of our freedoms back because we've now been given permission to go outside. We've now been licensed to be able to go to the store. We've now shown our little internal passport like they have in North Korea to travel. This is just insane. And I've seen regional police there, New South Wales, other areas are now being told, we're going to call you on your phone. If you don't answer in 15 minutes, we're going to come arrest you. You've got to FaceTime us and prove that you're in your house or where we say you're allowed to be with the phone tracking app, because they know people can just leave the phone at home and still go out and be somewhat free. They're like, no, you stay by your phone, and we're going to call you, and then we're going to arrest you if you don't answer. I mean, that just sounds freakish. And then in New Zealand, they're saying stuff like, don't look at the phone, don't talk to your neighbors. And by the way, if you have the Vax Pass, you can go to your neighbor's house and use the bathroom. I mean, this is like surreal. This is like a Monty Python skit.
It certainly is, and to think that those people that developed that app were patting themselves on the back for it. I mean, what they just did is brought a little bit of communist China, a little bit of Beijing into Australia. That sort of stuff it should be anathema to any freedom-loving democracy, but yet here it is. Alex, that's the worst of it, right? Having to have a little phone that you sort of stare into to show Big Brother that you actually are where you say you are. But every time we go anywhere in Australia right now, whether it be a cafe, a supermarket, wherever, we actually have to scan in. We actually have to tell the government where we are. We have a QR code, we get our phones and we put them up there, like good little citizens, and we scan in and tell them where we are at any given time. And there are people saying that should last forever.
Incredible. Stay right there. Final segment with George Christensen. Finish that point when we come back. Incredible. Stay with us. All right, final segment with George Christensen joining us from the authoritarian police state that Australia has evolved into, all under the Great Reset, all under the auspices of the United Nations. And they even call it Build Back Better. They even say that that's what they're doing. They're transferring a great open free society into a tyranny. Simply incredible. So I was asking our guest what his message is to the world, and I brought up Simeon Boykoff, who issued an SOS
als
to
ik
the world on the
soms
show just a few
een
months
hele
ago.
console maak.
And
Bam,
really,
helemaal niks.
what we can
Maar
do
als
as
dit
Americans and
spel
others.
dit
I mean,
wilt,
I'm going to do it soon. I'm going to DC or New York, and I'm going to protest at the Australian embassy. 4 people there that are being arrested if they protest. I mean, this is a big deal that a major Western country that I wanted to visit someday is now turning into North Korea. This is so dangerous. They have the domino theory with communism. Well, this is corporate fascism here, and I just go back to how incredibly dangerous this is. So, what is your message to the rest of the world?
Ja.
Well, Australia has changed fundamentally, and we do need help.
Oude, nu haat ik
But,
je.
I do want to send out an SOS to the rest of the world, the rest of the free world.
Eindelijk
Please
is
stand
het
with us,
dood,
please
hè?
support us, and every time we see people out there protesting, whether it be in front of an embassy or elsewhere, protesting for our rights in Australia, it really does embolden the patriots, the people who are for freedom in our country, to stand up. So please to the rest of the world, support us in this country as we go through all of these travails of Big Brother and the Great Reset and all the rest of it, Alex.
Maar dat komt. Dat
Would you like to be able to
beloof
say
ik
to
je.
Parliament in your speeches? I watched quite a few of them. They're all excellent, but they
Poetin
talk
is
over
de
all of them.
YouTuber op
Just
mijn
addressing the Parliament,
landscaping.
addressing the Australian people in closing. Spend 4 or 5 minutes or however much time you find. Just recapping and getting on record what's really going on.
Well, I touch once again on that point of civil disobedience. I'm a peaceful person. I'm not calling for violence in any way, shape or form. But we need to oppose bad laws and laws that are coming in that actually say because you are not double vaccinated, because you haven't partaken in a provisionally approved medical procedure, that you can't hold a job, that you can't go to a cafe, can't go to a restaurant, can't go to a hospital unless you're in some sort of health emergency. All of this sort of stuff is against our human rights, and we need to oppose it. We need to oppose it vigorously, peacefully but vigorously, because if we don't oppose it, well, Alex, is an old saying, you can't comply your way out of tyranny. You really can't. The only way that tyranny is going to end is when enough people say, no, we don't accept it. And for those people out there who have been brainwashed by the mainstream corporate media, and I know there's probably none listening or viewing your show that would be, Alex, but these are your fellow citizens. These are your neighbours. These are your mates. These are your brothers, your sisters, your relatives who are being just screwed down by Big Brother, by big corporations. Because of what? Because they've decided something about their own personal health situation. It's not something that people should be deplatformed for. It's not something that people should be be professional for. It's not something that people should be rubbed out of polite society for or lose their jobs for. But yet it's happening. So people who may have chosen to go and take the vaccine, that's their choice. But they too should be up in arms over this, because if they can do it for this, they can do it for anything. You mentioned climate change a segment ago, Alex. There are people, there are pinhead academics out there and bureaucrats out there who are actually suggesting that climate change is such an emergency, we could have lockdowns for that. We could have restrictions for that. Once they do it successfully for one particular problem, it then becomes a tool in the shed to actually deploy for any other sort of thing that they think is a crisis or a problem. And they will do this over and over again in the future if we don't actually say, no, enough is enough. Our freedom is more important than your agenda. And that's what we need to do right now.
Very well said. In the few minutes we have left, I have the German government, the British government admitting you're twice as likely to die for whatever reason after you've been double jabbed. It's not a vaccine. They now admit that after 6 months of Pfizer or Moderna, you basically have less immunity than you had before. Now they're talking about shots every few months. I mean, this is crazy. Whenever the head of Pfizer says, a month later is an executive order, not just where you're at, but here. And so we're rapidly moving towards where Australia is, and it's just a nightmare situation. So you talk about civil disobedience and not being violent. I totally agree, but here's the thing. They're being violent to us. They're beating us up when we try to go protest, even in our Democrat cities. Last year that was happening. I saw it in my own eyes.